Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'm Candy Fisher. I'm CEO for Headrest Technologies. And before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. If you do lose audio during the conference, we have the number posted. You can also connect via telephone, although most of you now should be able to hear the broadcast audio through your computer speakers. Our ReadyTalk representative will be available via chat for any technical issues during the first part of the webinar, and our marketing coordinator, Megan Barros, will also be available via chat. She will be collecting questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to send her a chat with any questions that come up. We'll address some of those during the panelist discussion, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. The webinar is being recorded, so we will send a link to the recording once it's available. It should be later this week at autobelay.com. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll have a brief survey. If you could take a few moments to complete that, we would really appreciate it. The information we get from the webinar surveys really helps us to figure out what additional webinars and content our customers would like to see. So with that, I want to briefly go over the agenda. We'll be spending about 45 minutes talking with the panelists and leave at least 15 minutes at the end for any questions. So we'll be starting with introductions, and then the panelists will talk about how Auto Belays have impacted their culture, how they go about promoting Auto Belays to their climbers and people outside of their facility, talking about risk management, return on investment, and then, as I said, we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. We have a lot of questions. We will go over the hour time, so you're welcome to stay on. And if you have to leave, the questions will be available on the webinar recording. So moving on to the introductions, again, I'm Candy Fisher. I'm the CEO of Headrest Technologies. We manufacture the TRUBLUE Auto Belay. And I'd first like to thank our panelists for taking the time today to be on this webinar to give their thoughts and their insights regarding their experience of using Auto Belays in their facilities. So without them, obviously this webinar would not be possible. We have a really great cross-section of facilities represented: climbing gyms, universities, rec centers. And I'm first going to have each panelist introduce themselves and give an overview of their facility, who their audience is, and why they decided to incorporate Auto Belays. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Curtin. Jason, if you want to give a brief introduction.
Sure. My name is Jason Curtin. I'm the Director of Outdoor Adventures for Texas A&M University. Also finishing up my last year of service on the Board of Directors of the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education. And then as far as Auto Belays go, we've been using Auto Belays in our facility here at A&M. We have 3 TRUBLUEs that we've been utilizing for about almost a year now. I guess first of the year will be, January will be 1 year that we've had them.
And is your audience mostly students, or do you open up your facility to people in the community as well?
Both. Typically we're here to serve the 50,000 undergraduate students at our university, but in addition to that we are open to the general public for things like birthday parties, scout groups, and whatnot, and so we've used Auto Belays quite a bit with that crowd.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Michael?
My name is Michael Larry. I'm co-owner of the Source Climbing Center. We just celebrated our 2nd anniversary, actually this past weekend, and we have 4 Auto Belays. We purchased our first Auto Belay about 3 or 4 months after we opened our doors, and quickly after that purchased 2 more, and then a 4th about 6 to 8 months ago. We brought Auto Belays in because we were in a newer market, so we have a lot of new climbers, young climbers, families, and Auto Belays worked really well for us in just making it possible for people to start climbing that first day that they come to visit.
Great. Thanks, Michael, and congratulations on your 2-year anniversary. Ben?
I'm Ben Wagner. I'm the Recreation Center Supervisor here at the Longmont Recreation Center. It's a public facility, 63,000 square foot facility, and the climbing wall is actually just one relatively small part of our system here. We have a gymnasium and pool and et cetera. So it's not a real big part of ours, but we consider it to be important. And we've had our Auto Belays now just since the beginning of summer, so we're just getting into this. We have 2 of them. The reason we decided to go to them was kind of to expand our options. without just throwing staff. Our economics are a little bit different probably than the other locations where we're concerned about the direct revenue, but our service and not spending too much to produce that service.
Great. And finally, Adrian.
Yes, my name is Adrian. Excuse me, Adrian Parker. I'm the owner of Rockin' and Jammin'. We have 2 full-service indoor climbing gyms in the Denver metro area. We have currently 12 TRUBLUE Auto Belays in service out on the floor, and we have one of the most accomplished and demanding climbing cultures because of our location in proximity to the Front Range, and that is something that we're very proud of, and we're just glad to be a part of this.
All right. Well, thank you all for your introductions. We'll just jump right into our first topic, which is culture. So you guys talked a little bit about who uses your Auto Belays. Can we go a little bit more in depth about the types of users, climbers to parties to more climbers, and how they use the Auto Belays in your facility?
We did. This is Jason from Texas A&M. We did quite a bit of surveying of our current customers before we brought Auto Belays on, because we have a pretty finite amount of space. We're pretty tight packed inside the rec center. We have essentially seven different faces on this one pillar that we can climb on, and so we knew that introducing Auto Belays was going to introduce some traffic, and we wanted to make sure that that was going to sit well with our paying customers. Overwhelmingly, they were in favor of bringing them on because whether they were trad climbers or whether they were sport climbers or whether they were just indoor climbers solely, they all viewed them as having some sort of utility. A lot of folks really wanted to be able to climb when their partners couldn't be there, or they wanted to be able to warm up real quickly before their partners got there. Brand new climbers wanted to have them so that they could they wouldn't have to make a partner or build that relationship. They could just come, and if they couldn't find a partner, great, they would just climb on the Auto Belay. And so everybody was pretty happy with it, with the exception of about 10 really vocal minority who really viewed, for them, Auto Belays as being destructive somehow to the soul of climbing in their opinion. But I would say, aside from that vocal minority, overwhelmingly, whether they were old climbers or new climbers, somebody found utility in them, which is one of our big reasons for bringing them on, was because we knew that it wasn't going to upset the apple cart too much.
For us at the Source Climbing Center, we had a couple other gyms in the area, and we knew we would be the first to bring the True Blues in and have the Auto Belays, so we were ready to sort of introduce something new to the region. And there's a little bit of pushback initially, a little bit of hesitancy, but now if someone asks who uses our Auto Belays, I have to say everyone, all different reasons. And now the other gyms in the region are now using Auto Belays too.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we had to weigh the same things as mentioned before. We have a very experienced climbing community here in the Denver area, so we had to make sure that we weren't stepping on any toes. And overwhelmingly, our Auto Belays have been very positively received. They are used by even the strongest climbers just for a training tool to warm up, or just simply to be able to climb whenever their partners aren't available. And also, obviously, the benefit for beginning climbers is it introduces that new climber to getting some air under their feet and actually feeling the rush of our sport. So it's been a benefit across the board. We do have a very small minority who, and as mentioned before, they're traditionalists and they do not want to see an Auto Belay there, but they also probably would prefer hip belaying as well. So it's a small group. It's been overwhelmingly positively received. But because of the Denver area, we do have to balance where we put them, how we make sure that we are not taking away any top ropes, things of that nature. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, but it's been very well received.
Here at the Longmont Recreation Center, I would reflect kind of that view that being on the Front Range in near Denver here, we have a from 3 to 80 group, and so because this is a city facility, so it attracted a whole group of people that maybe weren't interested in it before. We do have that very small minority that's vocal, that's against it. Unfortunately, that was about half of my staff as we got it started, but they have come to appreciate the aid that they do provide. We have to go from birthday parties for 3-year-olds to we want to be a place for experienced climbers, and we are in a pretty small area. As far as how we place them, we basically decided to do one on a difficult wall and one on an easy wall, and that was to accommodate the youngest, and then the ones that could come in and do the laps, do the up and down, the training, and get some use out of that.
Great. A couple of you guys mentioned, I think all of you, the vocal minority. How have you dealt with that, and have they come around, or will they always kind of be the vocal minority?
From our standpoint, they will all. It's never to the point where they do not want to climb at the gym. They just voice the movement of any modern advancement when it comes to climbing. They're opposed to it, but there has been no reason to really address it specifically. It's been something that they understand that the climbing community has to move on, and indoor climbing gyms, this is a tool that we have to offer, and everyone, or most people, take advantage of it. So they just complain, just in our ear a little bit.
I think our staff here at the Longmont Recreation Center was there was certainly a lot of the scariness from red point problems earlier that affected how they perceived anything new, and certainly that newness idea in the climbing community seems to be, there's always some pushback there from what I've seen. But I told them we're doing it, and they got on board and understood the plus to it, and that's paying off now.
Has anyone else had feedback from staff either before getting the Auto Belays or since?
We did. We had I would say the same thing with our staff. Many of our staff were the ones that said, "Gosh, I don't believe in these things. They're not the best thing for us. Why would we do this? Why wouldn't you promote the community of rock climbing and the social aspect of it?" But once I showed them the numbers and said, "Well, your customers are saying something different. Your customers don't seem to mind. We've done the homework, and it looks like this is something that they'd enjoy. And here's how the money works out too." And I'm sure we can get to that, but I can have one staff member running 3 Auto Belays at a birthday party, and that saves me 2 people. So in a way, I can begin to make a case for the numbers working out. And so once I do that and did that on paper and showed them that the numbers made sense, they began to buy into it. And then within a month of us having them installed and using them, then my staff, some of the more vocal ones, were the ones up there actually running laps using the Auto Belay, And so I think I can't remember whoever said it earlier, but anything new under the sun in the climbing industry tends to be met with some pushback, and then we adopt it. I mean, there was a group at one point that just said climbing gyms in general were an affront to the soul of climbing and to what climbing is. And what we know now is that climbing gyms have great utility. While they are different from outdoor climbing, they do have a place in the world of climbing. And so I think Auto Belays are the same, and provided we can manage them safely and do well by them, they're going to have a place. So.
Okay. So what other feedback have you gotten from your climbers since you put the Auto Belays in? Any feedback in terms of them obviously liking them, but also choosing to be a member or continuing to be a member as a result?
We have some members that just work in our downtown area. We're actually right downtown in Vancouver on Main Street, and so we have a lot of business customers that come in over their lunch hour. We had one particular customer that would show up and rush right past, check in, hardly say a word to anyone, was on the Auto Belay or switching between our 3 Auto Belays for 20 minutes and then back out to work. And she was just a great example for me to reach out to a lot of the other people in the area and offer some of our corporate memberships, pointing to people like that who they can get away for lunch for 20 minutes, hardly break a sweat, but they're going back in the afternoon much more refreshed for work. So that was a really neat thing for us to see.
Nice. Anyone else have specific feedback from members or climbers?
We've had similar.
I'll add that.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll add that whenever we have added auto belays or make changes, that's when we get the most feedback of basically, thank you for adding an auto belay, or thank you for putting an auto belay in this location because I've wanted to climb on this slightly overhung route. So it's whenever they're just sitting in place and nothing changes, we don't get much feedback, but as soon as we make a change, we get overwhelmingly positive feedback. And we tend to move ours around a little bit and mix it up. So.
And this is Jason, and I would add that same thing that was said earlier, or something similar. We've had quite a few people that have come to us just anecdotally and said, I didn't want to be a member. I wasn't going to be a member after I took my orientation class because I didn't have a partner. But during the class, I found out you had these auto belays, and now I'm going to buy a semester pass to climb at the rock wall. So, I can't put an exact number in front of you of how many people we've added in terms of membership because of the auto belay, but I do know they're out there. So we've gotten that verbal feedback.
And I would say the feedback here at a recreation center is, once they're up, because we're not membership based on the climbing wall, it's just one of those things people like having. They almost just, now that they're up, it just seems like something we've always had, and it just adds options that we didn't have before. And so the feedback we have is really 100% positive from our patrons.
Adrian, you mentioned that you get feedback when you move a unit or place a unit in a different place. How did you go about deciding where in the facility to place units originally and to move them around?
Well, it's still a work in progress, and we actually have some rather, or we consider innovative things. We actually have a few of our auto belays that are on movable tracks, so it increases the number of routes available to that one auto belay. But what I find, you have a lot of members that they are climbing quietly on the auto belays and just enjoying the routes. But once you make that change, that's when they start to pipe in that, hey, thank you very much for moving this over here. I only climb on your auto belays, and I've wanted to climb in this area. And until we make those changes, we often don't hear anything from them. They're just quietly coming in and out during the day, getting that 30-minute session. And so it has made us want to move those around. And obviously we're limited. We can't put auto belays in our lead caves. But moderately overhung routes are lead areas that are normally lead only. If we add an auto belay there, if it's permissible, it's really well received because people want to be climbing there.
Jason, how about you? How did you guys put the auto belays?
Some of it is hard to explain because you'd have to kind of know our facility, I'm sure, like anybody else. So we just targeted those walls that made most sense to us, the slightly overhanging walls, knowing that a lot of people are going to be using them to run laps, and build kind of power endurance or build endurance. We tried to put them on our slightly overhanging walls, knowing obviously that we couldn't put them on the on our cave, in our cave, our real steep terrain. And then we added one on a slightly slabby surface. It's a little less than vertical, and so to have some beginner terrain that was accessible. And then it was important for us to kind of group them all together to where they could be run, essentially. They could be monitored and run by a single staff member if the need be. So. And we don't really have a whole lot of other options in terms of where else we could put them. We have 3 auto belays on our 7 faces. So the other 4 faces are going to be really tough to put an auto belay on them. I guess we could on 1 or 2 more, but there's definitely 2 faces that are completely out of the question in terms of using them.
Gotcha. How about Ben or Michael? How did you guys decide where to put the auto belays?
At the source, we have an area of the gym that's restricted to climbers 12 and older. So we just try to make sure there's at least 1 or 2 in that area. So on our busier weekend days when there's a lot of younger climbers at the gym, there's still at least 1 belay, auto belay that our regular climbers and members can get to and get away from those crowds. But beyond that, it's mostly dictated by the terrain. Finding the right angle of terrain and trying to pick varying types of terrain to share between the 4 auto belays that we have.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of the same here. We were about the terrain where we wanted one for little kids, and then we wanted one that was hit as many people as we could. So it's a wall that would address advanced routes and some intermediate and advanced beginner routes even. So our wall is a cylinder. It's a silo, essentially, is how it's designed. So it's an interior wall in a circle. And so one on one side, 1 on the other. It was pretty easy to figure out the 2. I'd like to get a 3rd one.
Great. How does your route setting impact the use of auto belays, or does it?
I think at the recreation center here, with the 1 wall, we keep it fairly static. It's the beginner or the kids wall, so that a kid can try up and down. Our other one, it's one I think we've been pretty dynamic in trying to change our routes quite a bit, and I have a staff that's really into route setting, and so without making too many patrons, regulars mad, they do try to adjust that one to have that variety within 1 auto belay, because we just have the 2 options.
At the source, we typically have 2 routes underneath each anchor, and we're on about a 3-month rotation. So those routes are being changed every 3 months. Our auto belays, we add a 3rd route, so we actually have 3 routes to get a little bit better spread of the grades under each. And then when we reset, we're always moving the auto belay to a new anchor each time.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we really, because all of our auto belay routes are shared by top rope routes, it doesn't affect our setting other than the final finishing hold on some routes. We have found that if the finishing hold is too far to the side of the auto belay, it can create a little bit of wear on the strap. But as long as we'll put the finishing hold in the right place, that's the only effect that it has on our setting. Other than that, it's on our normal rotation of all of the routes throughout the gyms.
Great. Okay. Let's move on to another question, and there was a request just for you guys to identify who you are when you answer the question, just so people can know what kind of facility that answer applies to. But moving to the last question about culture specifically, how have auto belays impacted the culture of your facility?
I think at the Source Climbing Center. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
This is Michael at the Source, and the culture at our center, one of the changes is just training. We introduced a program last year where we had a physical trainer actually coming in and working with climbers, helping them cross-train. And one of the things we did is when people were climbing on the auto belay, they were essentially a timer. So while that person was on the auto belay, the other people were doing an exercise. And it was neat to see because it started to change people's perspectives on why they go to the climbing gym. So people started to think of it as more of a regular place to go training and seeing how those auto belays could be helpful in that way.
This is Jason from Texas A&M. We had the exact same experience. We didn't have a trainer come in, but we noticed that our staff all of a sudden didn't feel guilty about asking somebody to belay them for an hour, running laps. Instead, they could just go clip into the auto belay and do it. So my staff started training more. Then my staff started coming to me with ideas for programming. Hey, let's add a class that utilizes the climbing wall as a fitness tool. Let's do ground exercises plus climbing laps on the auto belays, and so the climbing wall began to be perceived no longer as just a diversion or an amusement, but instead as a legitimate training tool for fitness, and it's worked great.
This is Ben at
Lowell Parker with
better. Oh, okay, I'll go. That's all right. Yeah, it's harder to tell here. This is a public facility, and once again, climbing wall is a little smaller part of it. But if anything, it's just made it. We have fewer lines for us, so I think it's a more positive experience for almost anybody back there because we don't get backed up as much because we're always staffed while we're open, which I'll get to a little bit later.
This is Adrian at Rockin' and Jammin'. The only thing that I would add, obviously, training has been it's very important, and it's been an addition to our climbers' repertoire. But the one thing that it has changed in the climbing culture, those two new climbers that walk in together, they have no belay training, they don't have time to take an introductory course, they're just there to try it out. It allows them to immediately get on the wall, find out what this is all about, what our sport is all about, and rather than having to turn them away or limit them to just simply bouldering or make them sign up for a course, they can begin climbing quickly. And that's probably one of the largest changes as far as the new climber is involved.
Great.
I would have to agree with that, too, from the source.
Sorry. Do any of you guys also use the auto belays in any climbing-related programming, not just training, but like how to lead belay, anything like that?
At Rockin' and Jammin', we direct them to the auto belays. We do not utilize them in our courses. Our instructors do not. But we direct those members that want to learn how to lead, we direct them to the auto belay that has clips available there for them, draws available, and teach them how to practice. Teach them the correct way to use the auto belay as the backup and practice on rope. And the same thing for top roping. If they're not very comfortable with the top rope belay, they can be backed up with the auto belay. So we use those we direct our members and guests to the auto belay to assist in the learning process.
Great.
At the Source Climbing Center, we have a relationship with an organization in Portland that's a large outdoor climbing organization, and so they run some programs with us, introducing people to more sport-specific climbing. And in those large format lead classes, that's when we use the auto belays the most. In our regular lead classes that are a little bit smaller numbers, we typically don't use them as much.
Okay. Great. All right, well, let's move on to promotion. Once you guys got the auto belays, how did you let your climbers know about them? You start with Michael.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we just simply we sent out a blast to our membership emails and told them what changes are made or welcoming the new auto belays. We also make the announcements on social media. That's the two main things we utilize to get the word out.
At the Source, most of our word spread was through social media also, but also on our website we had videos, a lot of information. We tried to incorporate the auto belays into the overall culture of just what climbing is. When people come in and they learn how to belay and how to tie themselves in, we use 4 specific checks. In the same way, with auto belay, we use four specific checks with equipment. And we use the belay cards in the same way with auto belays as belaying. So we just make it another tool as if it's just part of the system. It's not so much something new.
What about you, Jason?
Same deal. We added it as a component of our skills check that we check off on for every new registered climber, and part of our orientation briefing includes spotting for bouldering. It includes a tour of the facility, and it includes how to use the auto belays, and then we'll get into teaching the top rope skill set using a traditional belay. And as far as promotion of the devices, they kind of promoted themselves. They're sitting right there in front of everybody and in the middle of our facility. As is typical with many college facilities, we are the centerpiece of the rec center, so everybody that comes in our rec center walks past our facility. And as they're looking up, they always ask what the robot at the top of the wall is. And so that gives an opportunity to explain it. Now, we did utilize the TRUBLUE postings that came with the device, and so we kept those at our check-in desk. The TRUBLUEs are here, Auto Belays are here, that kind of thing. So they saw those as well. And then I would echo the gentleman's previous statement about Facebook and social media and that kind of thing. We pushed it out through Twitter and we pushed it out through our Facebook site, which is our main way of communicating with our customers nowadays.
This is Ben at the Lamont Center. Yeah, it's for us. We're terrible at marketing. We're a city, so we used the TRUBLUE postings. We did put those at our front desk. We put it on our website, but for us, it was really more of an amenity in a bigger picture, and so it wasn't as big of a specific selling point. So really, it was it's here now, and come use it if you want.
Great. Does anyone do anything to communicate outside of your core group to attract either new members or people just climbers that might want to climb on an auto belay versus might climb on an auto belay, attracting them to your facility versus another one? I'm going to take that as a no.
Hey, this is Ben. We're in a pretty small Texas town, and so relative to the bigger metropolitan areas, and so we really don't have any other competition. We are literally the only climbing wall within 2 hours of us. So we don't need to push it that much. If people want to go climbing, they come to us. So
at the Source Climbing Center, we do have competition in our region. We're in the Portland, Vancouver area, and there's a lot of climbing gyms in the Portland area. And we were sort of the first to have the auto belays, and we had people come climb with us from Portland. And then when they went to climb at the gyms in Portland, they were disappointed that they didn't find the auto belays, so they found themselves coming back to us. But now the other gyms in Portland are now introducing auto belays, recognizing that their value.
This is Rockin' and Jammin'. On the Front Range here, we have a lot of competition as well, and auto belays are a part of most of the gyms. So most of the climbing community knows that they're going to have access to an auto belay. But if you have any good ideas of how to market that, in addition to what we already do, we're all ears.
Megan and I will brainstorm ideas for you.
And at Lamont Recreation Center, that's not our market. We don't feel like we're in competition. There's certainly we're near Boulder, so we're certainly near a lot of rock climbing gyms, but that's not really our market, so that's not a concern of ours. We're more about the bigger picture for the community here.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, moving on to risk management. Michael and Jason, you mentioned that auto belays are part of your orientation process. Do you want to address that a little bit further?
Sure. This is Jason. Yeah, at a university, typically when our students come in, they want to use the climbing facility. If they say the magic words, "I've climbed before," then that prompts a whole set of extra questions. Well, where have you climbed? What devices can you use? And then we ask if they demonstrate competence in the use of those devices, and as well as how to put the harness on, how to communicate with one another, how to spot for bouldering, how to tie in with a figure 8 follow-through knot. If they want to use assisted locking device, like a gree or a Trango cinch, then we're going to ask that they first demonstrate competence with an aperture style device, like an ATC, and then they can show us that they're competent in using a gree or a cinch. And then in addition to that, once we got the auto belays, they have to show us that they know how to, obviously take down the pull some slack into the strap, unclip the carabiner, clip it into their belay loop, begin climbing, let go, and trust the device to lower them. They have to show us that they know how to do all that, as well as the traditional top rope skill set. And then if they're coming to us brand new, never having climbed before, and they want us to teach them that skill set via one of our 2-hour orientation classes, embedded in that class is a component of instruction on the auto belay, how to use it properly, and how to reclip it once you're done, and that kind of thing, and what to look for. Essentially, like if you look over and see somebody climbing without being clipped in, how do you react to that? What do you do? That kind of thing. So,
at the source, we one of the things we use, like a lot of gyms, is we use a belay card system, just so our staff can quickly identify where people are at. So we have an orange card for people using the auto belays, and that's required before someone can even do a belay check for our blue card, which is required before they can do a belay check for our green lead card. There's sort of that progression. Our orange cards we only give out on a daily basis. So each time a person who isn't certified or checked off to be top rope belaying or lead belaying, when they come in to use the auto belays, as they check in, that gives our staff a chance to always check in with them and throw out a quick reminder, making sure that they're really aware of what they're using that day. And it gives us a chance to just continue building relationships by having that orange card.
At the Longmont Recreation Center, we're always staffed. We're always directly staffed with the wall when we're open. We don't allow any climbing during non-open hours because of the nature of this facility. It's multitudes of public people, so our staff always does a check every single time with anybody who's doing an auto belayer. So it's a little bit different situation than many of the other gyms, I think.
And do you also, when they come in to first use the auto belays, do you do an orientation and education? I noticed that you had our checklist, things you need to know before you use the auto belay, posted on your wall.
Yeah, our staff will check with every person, but it's a very quick thing, and they make sure that they're set and understand what they're doing. But it has to happen very quickly. This is just public people. They may come in and maybe a 10-year-old that climbs once, and then you got 3 more right in back of them. So that's somebody you're going to completely take care of, as opposed to, we do have training programs for belay, and auto belay systems are part of that. But with the amount of people we have, it's something that we keep a close eye on.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we have a very similar, as mentioned before, orientation for the new guest to the gym. So part of that is a quick facility tour, and either showing them or hooking them in directly to the auto belay is a part of that facility tour, so that way they understand exactly, or that we understand that they know how to correctly use the auto belay. The only thing I would add that we do differently, we do issue a lot of, verbal warnings to that new climber, to that person that has never used an auto belay, of what has been the common mistakes with auto belays. And obviously the most common is not clipping in. So to really stress that to all of our new climbers, we really take that seriously, because very simply we don't want to see that happen.
Sure. Okay.
And hey, Candy, as far as risk management goes for us at A&M, one thing we're adding, and this is due to a near miss that we've had very recently, we are probably going to go to a process of our staff clipping any auto belay user in, providing that extra set of eyes. Obviously, the thing that, as was just said, the thing that's everyone's fearful of is the person not clipping in, and that happened to us a couple of days ago, and nobody got hurt. Everybody walked away from it, but it was it was an eye-opener. And so I think the way we've been relying on people clipping themselves in and relying on the education process to take care of that, and I think the process has been good because it was actually one of my staff that made the mistake, and so I think we're going to go now to a way more conservative, having a staff member over stationed next to the 3 auto belays, and they'll do all the clipping in and unclipping of anyone climbing on the auto belay. So. Okay.
Well, I'm glad to hear that everyone was okay in that situation. That actually brings up a question from one of the listeners on whether your auto belays are open to any climber without supervision. And it sounds like Ben. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, just at the source, we have specific requirements for supervision, and one of those, anyone under 14 is required to have an adult supervision while using the auto belays, and then anyone under 12 actually requires direct supervision with an adult, and what we call direct is one-on-one, and the adult is clipping them in and out of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
At the Longmont Recreation Center, we're always staffed, so we're always nobody can ever climb without our staff being there. So it's a constant monitoring. And even during off hours, our auto belays are locked to our floor anchors with a padlock, actually.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we do not have a dedicated staff member assigned to auto belays. So obviously, staff do monitor all floor activities, but that climber, once certified as belay certified or been trained and going through the orientation, they are then left on their own to clip in and out of the auto belay at our gym.
You know, and I think that brings up a great distinction to make between the communities that are sort of that are exhibited here. The way, for those who are in higher ed, who may be listening right now that are in higher ed, we operate under a very different legal and sort of ethical paradigm. I wouldn't say ethical paradigm, but definitely a different paradigm of how we treat our students versus, say, the general public. And so there's a standard of care that's heightened for our university students, which I would probably operate a little differently if I were a commercial facility than I would if being in a university facility. So I don't begrudge like my colleagues who are running commercial facilities who choose not to have someone there. I would just say we're under a very different legal stress at a big state university than maybe our commercial counterparts would be, and I think that requires just a little bit different management style or a little bit different management technique in regards to the auto belays, which is why I am going to a dedicated staff person there. Oftentimes the person on the other end of the phone is not a customer, but the customer's parents. And so they obviously view their student in a very different way than maybe the student views themselves. So.
Sure. You guys mentioned several different things that you use for risk management, whether it be orientation, verbal warnings, adult supervision. Are there any other practices that you use or that you've heard of, such as belay gates or anything else that you use to make sure that the auto belays are safely used in your facilities?
The visual, Rockin' and Jammin', visual demonstration is the one thing I would add to that list that we do. Whether they are demonstrating it physically in front of you or we are visually showing them how to. It's the only thing I would add other than verbal and a video orientation.
At the source, we have our orientation, we have a specific set of information that people are given, and it's on the back end of a clipboard, and then on the front, each person that gets that orientation actually signs off acknowledging that they received all that information. And then they're updated in the system, and every 6 months if they haven't been into the gym, then the system tells us they haven't been in for 6 months and they're required to do the orientation again. And then we also use a belay gate, and in addition to the belay gate, we have a personal anchor system that connects to a second point. So there's actually sort of 2 barriers, 2 steps before a person gets onto the auto belay.
At Longmont Recreation Center, we don't have additional because of the nature, we're similar to the university, I would say, as far as that. If I was in a private market, I would certainly want to have more access to our facility than I do. That being said, we've been trying belay gates for just a week. We've just as an experiment, since we're so close to Boulder here, and in the end, I don't think it's something that's actually going to work for us because of the nature of our facility, where we always do have staff that checks every single time, is checking to see if people are clipped in.
Okay. Any last thoughts on risk management before we get to the last topic?
I think this is Michael from the source. The one thing that I would add, in the comparison to a commercial facility to more of a or public facility, is part of risk management is actually transferring that risk, making sure the customer and the user really understands the responsibility that they're taking on. So that's one of the things as a commercial facility, that's part of our mission and part of our goal is really helping people understand the risk of what they're getting involved with. And so that's why we're not there to clip them in. We really want them to take on that responsibility themselves and recognize that responsibility.
Okay. For those of you that don't have someone clipping the climber in or supervising that directly, are there any emergency action plans in place? That's the question that's coming from the audience. So an emergency action plan for a climber that's not clipped in, or?
We do. Rocket. Go ahead, Source.
Oh, I'm sorry. At the source, we have every 6 months we do a training with our staff where we actually run through scenarios of how to get a climber down off the wall if they're not clipped in properly or not clipped in at all. And then we have a rescue bag that has the equipment necessary right off to the side that can be quickly grabbed. So, and it's a really neat exercise when you're doing it with your staff because it's really empowering. The staff start to recognize in the worst case scenario, at least they have some options and they feel really empowered.
The one thing I would add at Rockin' and Jammin', we have, in the event that someone has made it up the wall without being clipped in, and it is caught, we have, because the locking beaner at the end of the auto belay is sometimes cumbersome, as it should be, and difficult to clip in, we have an attachment that is hanging from the wall near the auto belays that staff are trained to run out there, attach the attachment to the auto belay. It just has a simple beaner, easy to clip into the harness, and the first response is to raise the auto belay up to that climber, have them just clip it into their belay loop, and then safely can be lowered. Beyond that, if they cannot, and the climber cannot let go with one hand to clip themselves in, staff is then sent up to clip them in, or members that are close at hand. But it's up to the staff's discretion to make a decision if they will be going up to clip the person in, raising the auto belay to that person to have them clip in, or to have someone nearby, a member that we know that they're capable, if they're already ready to go, have them climb up quickly and clip them in. And I've actually had that happen with a member. I caught her 3 moves from the top. She was running laps, and she just, on this one time, she forgot to clip in. And that's what we had to do. We had 2 members that were geared up, ready to go, and they were up to her and clipped her in within seconds.
At Longmont Recreation, we do staff. Well, it's our intent, since we're new to that, of doing staff training. We've done one, and we have a procedures to get up the wall on either with 2 staff being there or when there's just one. Although I like the idea of possibly raising the auto belayer with an extra clipped-in simple beaner. So that sounds like a great idea to me.
Great.
We just found that it eliminated the having to fool with one hand that locking beaner. We just had to eliminate that out of the process.
Excellent. We're moving on now to return on investment. We've been answering most of the questions as they've come in, so we're just going to spend the last 5 minutes talking about return on investment, and then any additional questions that come in, we'll stay over a little bit longer and go through the Q&A. But could you guys talk about how you either budgeted or obtained funding for the auto blaze that you have in your facility? Because I know it's different depending on what type of facility it is that you run.
At Rockin' and Jammin', we simply view auto blaze as part of our facility improvement planning. It is budgeted in on how we are going to continue to increase those tools available to our members. So it's budgeted under facility improvement planning.
At the source, the money was there, so we took advantage of the opportunity, but also we just stair-stepped it. So we started with one, then we added a couple more, and now we've added a fourth.
At Longmont Recreation Center, we based the money being available on actually staff savings. So being able to go from 2 to 1 staff on quite a few occasions, and being able to monetarily show that to city management, that justified the purchase of one, and then almost immediately the second one. The cost won't be redeemed that quickly, but over time will be.
And then here at A&M, when we surveyed our group as to whether they were keen on the idea of auto belays or not, we also asked a couple of questions about if we were to add auto belays, what's the price threshold that you would be able to withstand of increasing your past costs. And we found that just by increasing costs on everyone by $2 a semester, which is not a lot, and by offsetting some of the cost of the auto belays through being able to reduce the number of staff that it would take to run like a lock-in or a birthday party or something like that. Through cost savings and revenue generation, we were able to completely offset the cost of the 3 devices. And then over the long term, useful life, also pay for the upkeep on them as well.
What are some key things you would recommend to people when they're evaluating, A, whether to get auto belays, and B, the different options that are out on the market?
At Rockin' and Jammin', because we are in the Denver metro area and we have some of the best outdoor climbing in the world available to us, we have to balance the needs of our very accomplished climbers between what they want in the gym and compared to what we think is best. The thing that I would recommend is very simply auto belay placement and what is going to make people the happiest. We have found, obviously, if we remove any top ropes or lead climbs or somehow hinder access to that in the gym, we will have a revolt. So we have to utilize our auto belays as simply a tool, an additional tool available to our members. And it's just simply having to balance, walk that tightrope between our auto belay lovers and our traditionalists. So I would say every gym's different, but here at Rockin' and Jammin', Denver Front Range, we have to balance both of those needs, and placement is our most important thing that we have to look at.
Along with us at the Source Climbing Center, some of the considerations that come to my mind is your check-in process, especially for a commercial facility. Can you offer an effective orientation and the traffic flow? Can you work with the number of people coming through your door? But I would also agree supervision is a big part. How are they visible in your facility? How can they be monitored?
Ben, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would reflect the Rockin' Gym view that it's finding that balance of, how many do you need, and do they take over something else, and finding a balance between the traditional climbers and ones who can utilize the the Auto Belay system also, and it's a balance thing and finding what works best. That's what we found in our first couple months here.
Anything to add, Jason? Okay, we are at 1 o'clock Mountain Time, so we're going to wrap up the main presentation. I want to thank our panelists, and we hope everyone on the webinar found this really useful. We will stay on and take a couple questions from the audience that have come in, but if you are having to leave, please do take a moment to complete the quick survey that will pop up on your screen, and as I said at the beginning, we will send you a link with the recorded webinar. For those of you that are in a university environment, we will also be sending out a link to sign up for our collegiate comp. We're running a TRUBLUE collegiate comp early in 2014, and we're taking applications for facilities that would like to host that. And like I said, we'll continue on with questions if the panelists don't mind staying on for a few more minutes. But to anyone that has to drop off, thank you so much for your time today. So a couple questions that have come in, you guys, from the audience. One is, how often do you change your webbing on your TRUBLUEs?
At Rockin' and Jammin', the webbing is on a bi-weekly inspection rotation, and it is just simply based on wear, because we can have the volume of climbers can vary just depending on weather. If it's a beautiful day here in Denver, people are going to go to the mountains. But if it rains, we can have a packed house immediately. So there's no real set schedule of when we repair it. As soon as it begins to show wear, we err on the side of caution and we go ahead and replace it. But there is no set date that we're going to replace it.
Anyone else?
At the source, we think, like everyone, we send in the TRUBLUE for recertification every year, and we haven't had to replace any webbing outside of those yearly inspections at all. In fact, it's not every year. I wish I knew the exact numbers, but we haven't replaced all of them. Like I said, we've only been in operation for about 2 years, so we've probably had some that have lasted almost 2 years.
Longmont Recreation Center would be the same. We're coming up on a year right now, but we did send one in, our original one, to get us on a set schedule with our closure time in August, and had the webbing replaced. And I think it's probably our intent to have webbing replaced each year on both of them by TRUBLUE. And then we check them monthly, and then after 6 months, our plan is every 6 months we're going to take them down and do a full check on them with the nozzle off.
So let me add with Rockin' and Jammin', we are replacing our webbing before the recertification on each Auto Belay. So it is something that we have to monitor. So I don't know if some gyms out there do not have to, but we have to keep a very close eye on it, because it does begin to show some wear long before the recertification.
Yeah, and from our perspective, we see this kind of across the board. It really just depends on how much use they get, where they're located. The webbing wear can vary based on that. So there are facilities that don't even change it once a year. There are others that change it obviously much more frequently than that. Along those same lines, somebody is asking, how many Auto Belays do you have as backup, if any? And you mentioned some of the maintenance that you're doing. How often do they require maintenance? You mentioned the annual recertification. This gentleman, Robert, is asking the cost. The cost of the annual recertification is $199 a year. But do you guys have any Auto Belays in backup, and what other sort of maintenance is being done with those, if any?
We don't keep one in backup at the source. That's actually why we bought the fourth, is so we could always maintain 3. it's just hard to keep one in backup because they are such a useful tool. That it would be hard for us to just have one sitting and not being used. But that's why we bought the fourth, so we can just maintain a baseline of 3.
We do not have a backup at Rockin' and Jammin' because of our proximity to Boulder and to TRUBLUE. Our recertification process is very quick, and I'm sure it is for everyone, but we just simply yank it down, drive it to TRUBLUE, drop it off, and we have it back very quickly, normally in no more than 1 week. So it's we don't have a backup because it's only an inconvenience for our members just for a short time.
This is Jason.
I would reflect that same thing. We're close to Boulder. I can just put them in my wife's car and have her drop them off there if necessary during our closing week. So we don't have a backup that we need to, and we certainly haven't had a maintenance issue either.
This is Jason at Texas A&M. Where our plan is just to, while we're down for the winter holidays, is when we're going to send them in to have them recertified and reworked. Just make it coincide with a time when we're going to be closed anyway. And for that reason, we don't have a spare to put up. If we had one go down for maintenance, we would probably, if that was out of the normal schedule, we would probably just shift it out and put the remaining 2 on the most used walls that we have.
Another question for those of you that Michael and Adrian that have commercial climbing gym, do you have any auto belay specific programs like a pass that allows auto belay use only?
At Rockin' and Jammin', no, we do not.
And at the Source, no, we don't either. Again, I think we just consider the TRUBLUE just another tool in the gym, but we really want to have it as a stepping stone to get people into other things. So I don't think we want to encourage people to only come to climb with us for the sake of the auto belays.
I would agree with that. We definitely want to continue to push the sport and allow the sport to continue to grow. We want people to learn how to belay and how to get outdoors and get them out.
Okay, great. Let's see. We have a couple other questions that are more something specific that we can follow up with directly. The final question I see here for the panel is, can you speak more specifically about how you're using auto belays to build community? Or are they just kind of becoming incorporated into your community?
At Rockin' and Jammin', again, the biggest impact that it has on our community, I don't know if we're building community, but that new climber that walks in the door, that if we did not have the auto belay, we could go show them how they could boulder, and if someone's available to belay them, we could somehow, but if it's busy and they do not have somebody to belay them, they are not going to get the full effect, and they are not going to be introduced to the sport the way that we would like to. But that new climber, that we can get them on an auto belay, get their feet off the ground, let them feel the rush that our wonderful sport offers to all of us. As soon as we get them off the ground, that new climber falls in love with climbing faster than I believe was occurring before. So I mean, they immediately love what they're doing, they feel what we feel, and they're ready to become climbers. So I would say we grow the community with giving that new climber access to something they didn't have access to. So, our existing climbing, it is a training tool that they love, they utilize. They can always utilize if they don't have a buddy to belay them. So they can just climb more often. They have more freedom to climb. That would be the only thing I could add from Rockin' and Jammin', really.
At the Source, I would say it is very much the same thing. The biggest difference I see is having worked in climbing gyms for a long time in the past, when people would come in, I would have to say, here's the next step for you to start climbing. where now I can train my staff to say, do you want to climb today? Are you ready to climb now? And when people say yes, then you have a climber. When you tell them, well, there's a few steps you have to take and send them out to think about it, you're less likely to add that climber to the community.
At Lawnmower Recreation Center, I would completely agree with both of those last statements, that it just adds another option and a very quick option to get people involved in climbing, get them excited about just another way to increase the visibility and the width of the sport.
That's great. The last question before we wrap up is, do any of you have a way to quantify a dollar amount that is specific to Auto Belay implementation? Do you have a way to track revenue or membership dollars that come in because you've put the Auto Belays in place?
No.
No.
Really,
I have at Rocket and Jim, I have thought about that actually a lot and tried to figure out a way to quantify if it is a measurable impact. And the answer is no, but what I can say is I know that there has been no negative impact. And it can only have helped our bottom line, but I can't measure it. I have no idea how to measure that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a good note to leave on. And again, I want to thank you guys, Adrian, Michael, Ben, and Jason, for all being on this call and sharing your experiences with us. We really appreciate it. And we hope to have all of you on a call in the future, on a webinar in the future. So have a good day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.